they are spending a lot of money ensuring that the people building these tunnels are like state of the art. But it's also important to keep in mind that a lot of the people who are contracted, so to speak, to build these tunnels for a number, it's against their will. Like they have no choice. It's like insulate this fucking tunnel or die.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Welcome to Borderland. This is our questions and answers episode. We've done one like this before, or several. I can't even remember right now. I'm a little under the weather, but Kat isn't. And you know, she likes to tell us everything that's going on. So I'm going to lead a lot of questions towards her. Bruna here is to help assist us in navigating through these questions that we received. I'm excited about several of them that I just looked at. But either way, here we are, and you guys get ready. We're here to answer your questions. Bruna, what do you got?
All right. Well, we have got quite a batch from our viewers and audience. And so thank you, everybody that dropped a comment below on our various platforms. We appreciate it. We always love hearing from you. Our first viewer is asking, how much coordination or communication actually happens between Border Patrol, local sheriffs, and state authorities? And where are those gaps costing us the most?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because while I was working for the Border Patrol just not so long ago, you notice that there's definitely a lot of miscommunication or lack of communication between groups for whatever reasons. I don't know. There's not like this hub of information that we could all go to get the accurate news information, what's happening. And so it is a challenge. For each state has a different kind of ran immigration kind of system. So each Border Patrol station usually has ran slightly different compared to the ones from the East Coast and the West Coast or the northern border. So this is a big problem. I think every kind of state has their own kind of situation and how they make that work better. Texas does usually really well between law enforcement and Border Patrol. But you remember when Camp Shelby, that park was kind of held hostage by the governor. Well, then at that point, they stopped communicating with the Border Patrol. And so communication became very scarce and very kind of almost edgy. Like every time you talked to them, it felt like a threat. So yeah, it's not a good thing. Every state runs it different. And that's what's even interesting, because a Border Patrol station might handle certain policies one way in San Diego and different in Texas. And so that's like one of these weird things that I noticed, that not all Border Patrol and like I would say probably ICE is the same, but not every state is the same. So they all kind of manage their kind of group differently.
Honestly, like obviously this is not, I don't have the same expertise as Vince in this, but since the Southern Border crackdown for dispatches, I've gone on assignment to both the Southern Border in Texas, El Paso, Juarez, and also in California, San Diego, TJ, right? And I would say that at this point in time, right now, there seems to be this pretty strong standard across the board where there's cooperation between like BP and National Guard. I can't speak to like other agencies, but those are the main two that are essentially, and ICE. But those are like the main bodies that have really been part of this crackdown since January. And there seems to be a lot of cooperation. I mean, I would say in like high level operations, I do feel like there is a little bit of, we're more important than you, since National Guard has been deployed, and there is like a little bit of lack of communication between those two bodies. But it seems as though, especially considering the numbers, that these groups, when it matters, are coordinating and they are like really joining forces in terms of cracking down over there, whether it be Texas or California.
Yeah, well, let me jump in on that. I mean, you're accurate on that completely. Those are all federal kind of employees, which they do work very well together because they all fall into a similar federal kind of, I guess, the communications capacity. But also the way the National Guard works with the Border Patrol is almost fully integrated. They're in muster, right? They're at the stations. The higher ups are at the stations for muster. They communicate where they're going to be covering, where they're going to be securing and whatnot. So There's really good communication between them and, of course, ICE, because, again, it's a federal system that's kind of very locked in. It's when you start dealing with the state police, right? The cities, the states, that's where things get really weird. And I think that's going to always be kind of a situation. Like in California, like in Chicago, some of the law enforcement doesn't want to support ICE and Border Patrol. And this is actually why, just for the audience to know, we're having Border Patrol's chief on the podcast, I believe, in 2 weeks. And these are some of the questions that we want to ask, is how it's been going with the Border Patrol, integrating with ICE more, and all the operations that are happening right now.
One thing I did notice, though, and like, I guess, yeah, it's a great point that these are federal agencies, because that completely changes the game, right? Like, and then
Yeah.
you throw like a state trooper in there and maybe things get a little bit murky. But for example, like when we were covering the influx of migrants and like personal belongings that are disposed, and including IDs at the San Diego border, where there's no wall and a lot of people previously were like coming in. Um, CBP saw us filming and like doing the whole thing and didn't say anything, like said hi. It was actually kind of cute. And then National Guard pulled up and they wanted to question the hell out of us, right? So it's like interesting that they're all running the same route, but BP didn't let National Guard know, oh yeah, those people are fine, whatever. That reporter's really beautiful and seems to be super smart. And National Guard still came up and had to question us.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me explain another thing on that. So what has been interesting, because I spent time down in San Diego when the Marines came down and started putting up the barbed wire, and I got to sit in with some of the National Guard Army and talk to them a lot about it. And what's interesting is that, the National Guard didn't have the arrest authority at the time, and I think in Texas they did get authorization to assist, but they were kind of where the National Guard and Marines, what are they authorized to do at the time? And I believe it's very similar now, is just observe and report, right? They can't actually put hands on unless it's a very escalated scenario, but observe and report. And so sometimes some of them take that to a very high level. And most people don't realize Border Patrol, we're not an aggressive posture. When someone comes across the border, it's like, hey, we stop them. And almost everyone kind of submits to like the arrest. When somebody runs, obviously then the threat is escalated at that time. But most people probably think we just run and tackle everybody and are aggressive in our manners. And so I think sometimes the military personnel tries to create that persona of what they believe our job is. And so they're just missing the mark on it. When they spend more time with the Border Patrol, they'll see it's really a natural conversation. Like, hey, are you here illegally? Yes. All right, well, then you're arrested. Let's go run, let's go pretty much in process you. So then ICE eventually can take you. And so I think there's always that misconception. And military members sometimes always want to be a higher level of threats, right? It's kind of just the training. But most of the people being deployed down to the borders, most of the military members that are down there are not like infantry, high-level tactics individuals. They're numbers. They are, when I was there, the National Guard had their band out there. You know what I'm saying? It was the band, and what they were doing is observing. So they're using their eyes, they're using techniques that they've learned. They weren't war fighters per se. You know what I mean? And so I think there's a misconception there from the outside public, thinking like everybody going down to the borders deployed are door kicking Marines or special operations Army. And that's not the case.
So going back to the question, what's that costing us then?
I don't know if it's really, I think
if anything.
Yeah, I think it's hard to bring different federal agencies together and have them work with cohesion immediately. I think within a year, this is going to, within the next year, this is going to start to kind of have a system that works in just like the way the military works in the federal system. They're all going to have, like I said, the muster that the Army does with the Border Patrol helps them stay good communication between each other. The state is always going to be different state by state. The city is always going to be different city by city. And so what's it costing us? I think at the moment, nothing. The Border Patrol and the military that's deployed down there are doing a really freaking good job with the border. So what's the cost there? Not much to worry about. I think, there's other concerns down the road more inland to our country, I think is where we should be worried more about the cost of that.
If you're looking for a recovery shake that actually does its job, check out Formula One from First Form. It's a rapid digesting whey protein isolate made for post-workout recovery. That means that it gets into your system fast to help the muscles repair and cut down soreness. It mixes ultra smooth, it's easy on your stomach, and it tastes legit. All the flavors are good, but for me, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is hands down the best one. Plus, it's NSF certified for sport and Informed Choice certified, so you know it's clean. First Form is giving free shipping on orders over $100, and if you don't love it, they'll give you your full refund. Hit the link in the description and grab Cinnamon Toast Crunch Formula One today.
Everybody, let's be real with each other for a second. Most doctors do not care about optimization. They do care about you, but they're checking your basic labs. They tell you that everything is looking normal, and they're gonna send you on your way. Meanwhile, you're feeling tired, your performance is slipping, and you know that something is off, and that is where Marek Health comes in. Marek Health isn't your typical doctor's office. They're a next-level health optimization platform that actually listens to you, runs advanced lab testing, and helps you optimize your hormones, your metabolism, and your overall performance. So whether you're looking to boost your energy, maybe gain some muscle mass, or you just feel like you're not your best self anymore and you want to change that, Marek gives you those tools and can help you make it happen. You have two options. You can go with their guided optimization program and get a dedicated health coach and medical provider to help you with supplements and prescription treatments. Or if you're more of a do-it-yourself type of person, you can order self-service lab tests and take control of your health on your own terms. The best part is, either option that you pick, you can get 10% off of your order right now. Just go to marekhealth.com and use the code FOCALPOINT at checkout. That's MAREK health.com with the code FOCALPOINT for 10% off.
This one says, there have been more stories and cartel safe houses and stash spots showing up in U.S. neighborhoods. So how serious do you think that problem really is, and what do most people miss about it?
Well, I'll say I'm interested in seeing Kat's answer on this because, I haven't been on the border for about 6 months now. But I'll tell you, just from the beginning of immigration and the way, as much as we're not seeing the numbers on the borders, there's always going to still be these groups that are transporting high valued individuals the way that they always have done it to make their money. And the way they do that, whether it be by tunnel or air or however, there's always a stash house. And from the stash house, it's kind of point A to point B to point C is how they do it. And I don't think that's ever not going to be a thing. Just by way of the access coming into America is a lot harder. You're going to start popping those up more often. I just think that's just the way it is, because during the Biden administration, it was kind of like no one cares anymore. Open, like walk across. You're going to come through. You're going to be at this check-in location, and they're going to just release you to the country. Well, now you have to kind of adapt to this very structured border, and the safe houses is going to be their system that they've used for years and years and years.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the nature of simply crossing very easily and still maintaining a low profile, those days are pretty much gone. And we've seen this like in headlines and in the reporting that we've been doing. I don't think that there's more stash houses than before. I just think that a lot of the cartels, particularly the cartels along the border or mafias that control that southern border drug trade, are really tapping into the reserves that they have in the US because they can't get over the steady flow of drugs. But of course, the demand is still there. And we knew from the beginning, I think we talked about this in like one of the first Borderland episodes that I was on, is that there are reserves in the United States in case of a situation like this. So they have the pre-existing kilos, etc., that already exist in particularly border states or like major cities that like supply to the rest of the network across the United States. One thing that we're seeing, of course, and I think that this is simply because it is a priority for the DEA and every federal agency looking at this. I think that this is a priority for every agency investigating this, but it is the tunnels running from from Mexico into the US, particularly in Texas, we're seeing this breaking news like every couple of weeks where there's like this massive insulated 25-foot wide long tunnel. And these are tunnels that have existed for a while. And if you look at the way that they've been built, these have obviously not just been like sprung up brazenly. But this is a focus for federal agencies to crack down on these particular tunnels. And the reason for that is because since the physical land crossing border has been pretty much shut down, this is what cartels are turning to. And it seems like they're getting quite a solid flow of drugs and people into the United States through these tunnels.
Yeah, I'll let me add to that. I guess sometimes I forget how much that is a value that maybe the average person doesn't know, but the cartels spend millions and millions of dollars in hiring some of the most educated people in knowing how to build tunnels the right way. They have sent cartel to Ukraine, or they've sent experts from Ukraine back to, you know what I mean? Like, this is a high level operation for the cartels to have really good tunnel systems. From San Diego is one of the most popular places. Calexico's had several big ones, but then going into Texas now, they found one in El Paso recently that we have no idea how long that's. Yeah, the one big one that they talked about recently in the news that everyone talked about.
Yeah, there was the one that led to the vape shop. And then prior to that, the one from the big Juarez X that was like insane state-of-the-art tunnel.
Yeah, and the amount of drugs and personnel that could be moved through these tunnels is insane. They have air. They have people that know how the air works to make sure that there's good flowing air, ventilation. They have lights in the system. They're big enough that they could either transport walking personnel through them. And there's some that is just kind of a smaller, lower, and that's more of a drug transport kind of tunnel. So there's levels to these things. And we don't have the technology. They've been working on a lot of trying to find a way of using some kind of technology to identify these. But that's been a big challenge. They've used all kinds of different systems. Nothing is 100% accurate. So the biggest challenge we have on the border is really trying to identify tunnels that have been in place for a while that they're using to transport drugs left and right. And so the tunnel thing is an interesting one. And then I don't think that federal agencies have really cracked down on a system that can identify them with any kind of ease at the moment.
Yeah, and I think cartels know that, which is why they have been so open about it. And the operations are actually next level. Like Vince said, yes, they are spending a lot of money ensuring that the people building these tunnels are like state of the art. But it's also important to keep in mind that a lot of the people who are contracted, so to speak, to build these tunnels for a number, it's against their will. Like they have no choice. It's like insulate this fucking tunnel or die. So there's not really much you can do about that. And those tricks come from the Sinaloa cartel. I mean, El Chapo was the first one to really, I mean, they existed prior, but El Chapo's prison breaks, it kind of was like, hey, we can get away with this, and the Americans don't know how to look for it. The fact that this massive tunnel went from the X in Juarez through the drain system into the United States, into El Paso, I know that that was a big upset for American law enforcement, and it was likely a great victory for the cartels.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Calexico, there's a really interesting one. It's a story out there where it goes from the border, probably I'd say about 300 yards into the restaurant of what I believe was either a Popeyes chicken or a Burger King. But yes, and then when that went out of business, it stayed there and they made it look like they were doing renovations. Well, the renovations weren't actually happening. It was drug smuggling at the time. Some agent was kind of like, man, this is kind of fishy. I don't understand it. Why are they working so late? And a law enforcement officer was able to identify that. But like, it's in a restaurant that everyone day in, day out would never recognize. It's fully functional. On the back end, cartel is just slipping drugs through every day. This is very common. You find it at houses. You find it everywhere. And so like, that's the level these go. And so you have no idea if, a long existing McDonald's has turned into that, anything on the border, or if it's a real like McDonald's, right? It's just, that's the kind of thing we're dealing with here.
So, Kat, that's your next dispatch assignment. Go to every McDonald's along and find
Can
the
I
next
get a
tunnel.
Big Mac and a kilo, please?
I actually called Kat back in the day when they found that first tunnel in El Paso, and I asked you, I said, "How can you find information on the damn tunnels?"
And
Like
I
that's
went to
one
look
that
for it. I did, and I went
Yeah.
with your buddy, but we couldn't find it. And CBP was getting pissed off. And I was like, hey, don't get mad at me just because you didn't find the tunnel.
There is a tunnel in San Diego that we keep available for training. If you want to go down to that, I'm pretty sure I can set that up if you want to see what that one looks like.
Is that the Chinese underground tunnel thing? The city?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, there's one in San Diego. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And I actually, yeah. See you guys in the next dispatches, straight from underground.
Hey guys, Sean Ryan here. I'm super excited to announce a project that I've been working on. I partnered with Ironclad for their newest original series, Target Intelligence PSYOP. It's an 8-part audio experience where we find out who is really pulling the strings. Buy it today, it's PsyOpshow.com. Link is in the show notes. The stakes have never been higher.
Today's episode is brought to you by DeleteMe. We have talked a lot about people getting caught in timeshare scams, falling for pig butchering schemes, or getting those mysterious text messages that you have no idea where they came from. I've spoken with guests who hunt hackers and work to protect people's personal information. But here's the thing. Your data, your personal data, your name, your address, your phone number, even your relatives' names can be bought and sold online by data brokers, putting you at risk for identity theft, scams, and harassment. Now, that is why we have partnered with DeleteMe. Like the experts we've had on the show who actively stop hackers and scammers, DeleteMe works behind the scenes to remove your personal information from hundreds of people search and data broker sites. They do it continuously, securely, and without outsourcing. Plus, real privacy advisors are available for custom requests so you're never on your own. DeleteMe has been the leading service for removing personally identifiable information for over 15 years. They verify your data is actually on these sites before requesting removal, reducing unnecessary exposure. Wirecutter named them the #1 service of its kind, and judges, journalists, creators, and podcasters all trust DeleteMe to protect their privacy. Nowadays, this isn't just a nice to have. I feel like it's an essential. And DeleteMe makes it super easy. Just create your account, enter in your basic information on the dashboard, and they're going to do the rest. Within about a week, the first report arrives showing exactly what has been removed. Take control of your digital privacy today at joindeleteme.com/ironclad and use the coupon code Ironclad, all one word, all uppercase. You can also scan the QR code to get started. It's one of the few services actively keeping your personal information out of the wrong hands.
All right. Well, speaking of dispatches, let's just address this one right away, Kat. I'm going to you. So we worked on a pretty extensive dispatch. I mean, well, you were brave and went and spent some time in Juarez on a really big story about baby trafficking that was happening and, more femicide that's been perpetrated by the CJNG. And La Diabla, you kind of broke that story, and there's been some responses to that story. Other reports from Mexico mainly claiming that the government fed journalists info that blamed the CJNG when it was actually La Linea. So I'll let you give the full context of this, but what would you like to say to that regarding that story that you broke?
Yeah, so I broke this story at this point, like quite a few weeks ago. And all of the information in my initial report ended up being accurate, including the fact that this operation is being spearheaded by the CJNG and not by La Linea. I think what a lot of people fail to understand is that in Juarez, in Chihuahua, like the cartels are very fragmented. Okay, you have the Juarez cartel, you have La Linea, you have Vieja Escuela. There's multiple, and I went over all of these factions and groups that are operating there, and was told by the high-level source who gave me all of this initial information that ended up being corroborated by NCTC and by Mexican officials that also this is CJNG. And it, my focus for this story wasn't about which cartel is doing it. So I think if people's main qualm with this story is she's wrong about who's doing it, it's like, how about you give your empty head a shake? Because what's really happening, and the whole problem here, is that young pregnant women are being murdered and their babies are being stolen and trafficked. So that's the thesis here. That's the problem. And I have information that says CJ&G is in charge of this, okay? And if people can only say that, well, you know what, this is what the American government is feeding to vilify CJ&G, there is no need to further vilify CJ&G. They are the villain, period. Second of all, the only other person or like source, let's say, I'm using that term lightly, that has said, oh yeah, this is La Línea, is La Diabla herself, the fucking murderer, okay? Cautionary source, right? So unfortunately, I think some people will try to nitpick when it comes to these details, and I understand why, because this is a very sensitive story. It's a big story, and when I broke it, there was no public information. There was no press release. No one else was talking about it. And it's also important to keep in mind that when I broke this story, I got a ton of heat for it, and a lot of people were calling bullshit. And so I'd like those very people who have questioned every step of this reporting to just reflect a little bit, honestly.
Yeah, we had a guest on here that didn't believe that as well. I mean, why does it matter which cartel it was, but also this
because
pattern
of the responsibility. I understand why it matters. It's not the crux of the story, but it's also the one place where they can discredit me, which a lot of people just, I don't know, they like to do that. It's flattering.
The interesting thing is that we've seen the pattern of people trying to deflect any information that is connected to the CJ&G. Same with that ranch with a lot of the clothing that was found. People were like, that's not CJ&G, that's not real. And I'm like, that's crazy that anyone's trying to bounce things off of CJ&G like that. They wouldn't do that. And I'm like, guys, it's a cartel. I'm not saying they did. I don't know. From the intel that you've given us, Kat, it sounds like it was. From the mothers, you know what I mean? From the mothers who lost their kids, who identified that location, they say it was. And so for the most part, to me, the most credible sources are saying it's CJ&G. But why would anyone try and say it wasn't? I find that interesting.
It's also important to keep in mind that since the beginning of my reporting on this, there have been certain details that I cannot report publicly because it's an ongoing investigation, right? So out of respect for the victims and their families, and then also the integrity of the investigation, I can't share everything. So sometimes, of course, I'd love to be like, here, take it. It's CJ&G on a silver platter. You just can't do that. And that's very similar with the Rancho y Seguirre, like you said. A lot of people wanted to say that it wasn't CJ&G and that it was like some government operation, that they were like, I don't know, kidnapping people. Just like crazy theories when the MO fits. And like, if it smells like shit and looks like shit, it's probably CJ&G.
Great analogy.
Thank you. Very literary.
Well, I will tie the next two questions kind of in one, because I think we do get so many conflicting reports and what's true and what's not, especially about these topics. And both of you have addressed this before, the subject of psychological operations or PSYOps. And it is something that is majorly involved and that you two deal with in what you do. And so the official question is, please explain psychological operations. And Vince, I'll start with you. I know you've been a PSYOP, and Kat, you just broke I think it was last week's dispatch, the narco banners, how that ties into PSYOps. And so let's tackle that. And then I also want to tie in, someone else also asked, what are your thoughts on bounties being placed on CBP personnel, which also, Kat, you talked about this as well as a tactic of PSYOP.
Yeah, so PSYOP. Psychological operations, essentially the military has used it for many years as a system to psychologically have some kind of advantage or influence on the enemy. This is being currently used by our media. I believe by our media, I'm going to say it like that, to influence and sway people's narratives left or right. But not only that, everyone is doing this now. This is like a big thing. You can call it information campaigns. All right. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but essentially creating some kind of product, whether that be a meme, whether it be a video, whether it be a blog, whether it be a news article that creates some kind of influence of a narrative that might be false based on false pretenses to hopefully influence others to believe it is either true, factual, or whatnot. The cartel's been very good about this, using social media, using different things, even just like the CBP thing. I'll jump into that real quick. When you hear that the cartel is going to be paying people for doxing, all that stuff, my wife is like, do you think this is real? I was like, I don't. I think that's a PSYOP personally, because I think the cartel is going to say, go ahead and deport them. They're just going to pay me $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 to bring them back. You know what I mean? So I don't see why doxing would even make sense for any other reason besides that's more of an internal United States thing. I think if there is someone who's wanting that information, it would be someone like Antifa, right? These internal, these disruptors in America, those are the ones who would be looking for information like that to do what they think is the right thing in America. I think the cartel, they make more money off people being deported because they turn around and help bring them right back. And so that's my opinion. I believe it's a PSYOP, and that's what a PSYOP has done. It tries to help influence some kind of narrative for a reason. They're looking for an impact. And so that's what I believe is happening in every area of our government outside of the news, the media, and all this other stuff. But go ahead.
So I don't actually think that those bounties, that list, whatever, was a PSYOP. What I think happened is that the United States, I talked about this in my dispatch episode yesterday because I started digging into it. When I first saw this announcement that you can get $5,000 for doxing and then like $50,000 for assassinating an agent, it just didn't make sense to me. Like, that's not the cartel's MO. They're not profiting off of this. If anything, they're losing money and drawing more attention to themselves within the American government. That absolutely does not fit how they run operations whatsoever. Point blank. Now, what I did find is that there may have been, in like this indictment, a Latin King member had messages in his phone that showed something. He was from Chicago, that showed something about threatening or targeting ICE officers. Now, when something like that happens, if the threat seems even remotely credible, even if it's from one source, I mean, the criteria is pretty lenient. There is then this duty to warn. So they have to warn the individuals who could be affected by these threats. And I think that's what this was. I also don't think that this comes from like this deeply gathered high level intelligence. I think that this was from a lot of open information. And like you said, Vince, this is something within America, okay? Americans are polarized and passionate about ICE and immigration and deportations. The Mexican cartels from the highest level could not give a shit, honestly. It's not that's not their their rodeo whatsoever. This is something politicized for Americans, and I think that it was actually kind of shocking that when this hit social media, this announcement, how many people there was like such a frenzy about it because it's very obvious that it's not cartels. Also, okay, we know the MO of the United States government and this administration. If this was real and there was a ton of intel on like, this is certainly a threat and it's coming from the cartel, we would have known right away which cartel this was coming from. And they would have used that information to further vilify this cartel in front of the American public. So do I think it's a PSYOP? No. But do I think that it has more to do with bureaucracy and like duty to warn and like there was some intel gathered and this is a polarized topic in the US? Yes.
I'll say this, by way of it being out in the public now, it is a PSYOP in the sense that now people will start to use this to either defend or protect, right? And so now this is being used on the side of ICE saying, see how dangerous it is, guys? See what it's like? And this further polarizes our own country. And on top of that, this gives fuel to those like Antifa, these extremist organizations that are looking for fuel on the fire. So it has now become one. If the intent originally wasn't, it now is one. You know what I mean? And that's the funny thing, because psychologically, my wife wakes up and goes, oh my God, this is so scary. We don't know what this is, right? And so that's what's an interesting part about it. Like, even if it had no intentions to be, the way social media is used these days, it has a psychological impact.
What I can say for certain that was a PSYOP and scared a lot of people internationally was the whole Narcomanta, the banner that popped up that was like, hey, Cash Patel, you're a dead man. Anyone DEA, you're dead. Americans, if you come to Cabo and Baja California, that, because I think this banner popped up in Baja California Sur, that I had family members from every part of the world sending it to me being like, is this real? Like, can we go to Mexico? And I'm like, yeah, you are not on the cartel hit list. Like, Auntie, you're good.
Yeah.
But I think that was a PSYOP, because I also don't see, and I talked about this in my dispatch, is like, the cartels are not going to openly target high-level American politicians. Are they going to threaten Chief of Security Mexico Harfuch, Omar Garcia Harfuch? Fuck yeah, they've tried to kill a guy. Are they going to go for President Sheinbaum when she's not following or particularly making them happy? Also, and any governors, okay? But that's their home base. That's completely different. And most of those people are on their payroll. So like, they got to listen to the shadow government that's operating out in the open. When it comes to these high-level American politicians, there is no reason. There was also no reason to threaten Americans who are coming to these tourist destinations, when historically we have seen that these tourist destinations and most tourists are completely spared from encountering cartel violence because they fund so much of the cartel. Those major resorts, cartels have a stake in them. And one thing that I found surprising was when I reported on this, and people were like, well, if cartels cared so much about American lives, why would they supply fentanyl? Again, give your empty head a shake. Like, people, fentanyl, is incredibly lucrative. Threatening Americans coming to a tourist destination, not lucrative. Supplying fentanyl, yes, sure, there's overdose fatalities. That doesn't mean a new addict isn't going to pop up from the weeds tomorrow.
It's interesting. The PSYOP thing is starting to become like a more publicly known concept, which I find interesting. And I know Ironclad is launching a show called PSYOP, and I'm interested to see that as well. But those who probably don't know, I am considered a 37 Fox, which is a United States Army psychological operations. I was a PSYOPer for many years. And so I definitely understand how this works. We don't talk about it too often. It's something that I've just noticed. And the PSYOP community is very involved in communicating internally about what things we have seen. It's just not public information. Some people just don't understand when they're being influenced, when they're being kind of dragged along. And so, yeah, this is something that I know intimately, and I find it interesting to watch how it happens throughout the day.
Everyone who listens to your podcast is going to freak the fuck out now. And I just want to give full disclosure. I am not a PsyOper, guys. I am a truther, okay? Absolutely not.
I know that. And that's what's funny is like, that's what I don't normally say, but like the truth is I have a background in it, but I also have a background in psychology. I have a background in journalism. Like, I don't know what to say, but I think the best thing about it is I've always been fully transparent in the fact that, like, hey, I can tell you what I think is PSYOP. I can tell you what I can show you the signs of PSYOP. I'm actually kind of a counter PSYOP narrative guy. I want to show you what it is and let me explain why it is so you have a better understanding of it. Because I think American society is really bad about dissecting information. And so they believe everything they read. And I'm hoping that I can be an answer for that. But like, hey, this is a PSYOP. And let me show you why. You know what I mean? Like the thing that you said is not a PSYOP. Yeah, but weird thing about social media, it turns into a PSYOP and it feeds people's narratives. And so then they're like, oh yeah, I told you this is happening, or, oh my God, this is happening. And the way we receive information these days, we don't have very critical thinkers because we have immediate information gratification, right? Like, oh, this is good. I needed this. This fits my narrative, so I'm going to run with it. And that's a very dangerous thing. So hoping to get people out of that mindset, hoping to get people doing a lot of their own narrative searching, like Googling, look at multiple different forums, and really trying to catch an eye for like, this doesn't make sense. Like the one for the bounties, to me, it's like funny. It's like, it doesn't make sense, guys. Like there's no way the cartel cares what my name is if I'm an agent, because it does nothing for their pockets back home. They're a businessman. You know what I mean? So like, I hope people can start to see that and really do some critical thinking on things like this.
I also really value critical thinkers, and I don't think that it's that we have a lack of it. I think just like when everyone's living in this polarized environment, especially when it comes to media, then there is this heightened sense of confirmation bias. And that's kind of where the problem lies. I think most people are completely capable and kind of do their like inherent reaction is to think critically. But when you want to just always be right and fight with the other side, it's hard to do that accurately.
Yeah.
Now, Vince, just a question. Which of your Borderland episodes are PSYOps?
None. I have no reason to stop. I'm just telling you what I report. You know what I mean? And the cool thing about it is I'm not leading any conversation. I'm inviting people to tell me what they want to say on my platform. We've created a platform for information. We've created a platform for the experts to say their piece and for the audience to make a determination whether they like it or not. That's what it's about for me, is let me create the platform where they can speak, because most of these guys don't get the option to speak or don't get an opportunity to say their piece. It's up to the audience to sit here and be like, I like that guy. It's interesting. Let me dig further into it. The guy we just had, Jordan Goudreau, is hated by so many people in the special operations community. I loved him. I found him to be fascinating. And I even reached out to several journalists that could not discredit one thing he said. That is interesting. And that's why I said, I'm going to give you the platform. Say what you want. I'm going to go research this. And I did. And I can't find anything to discredit him, which I found even more interesting. That's what this is about for me. Give people the platform. Let them speak their mind. Critical thinkers, counter it all you want.
That's a good mission, and I respect it. Everyone comment below if you think Vince is psyoping you or not.
The truth is this. How do you counter PSYOP? It's full transparency. People know my life. They see it every day. I don't hide what I do. I'm very transparent in everything that I do. This border subject's interesting to me. It's been my life for almost 15 years now. So I understand the concerns of it, but I think I'm a powerful tool because I know how to identify when PSYOP is happening.
Everyone drop in the comments if you didn't know Vince was a PSYOP and now you don't trust us.
Yeah, like I don't watch the podcast enough because I didn't even know
I'll tell you this. Honor graduate and leadership award in the training. So yes, I know what I'm doing.
Oh my God. You're not helping your case.
If you're into quality gear, you need TacPack, a monthly subscription box loaded with tactical gear from the top brands like Battle Arms Development, 9line, 511, and more. You can choose from TacPack Standard, $59.95 shipped with $90 to $120 worth of products, or TacPack Plus, $139.95 shipped with $240 to $300 worth of products. This September, TacPack Plus is stacked with over $330 worth of gear, including Battle Arms Development, 9line, and Next Level Armament. Use code Ironclad at TacPack.com for a free $70 tactical gift, pushing your value past $400. TacPack, gear you'll actually use.
I want to thank our partners over at Ammo Squared. They've built what they call America's Ammunition Reserve. Basically, this is an ammo savings account. You can sign up, pick from more than 70 different calibers. You can set an auto-buy budget and either choose a shipping schedule, or you can just let your personal reserve grow. Over time, your ammo stacks up and it's stored for free in their climate-controlled facilities in Texas and Idaho until you are ready to ship. There are no minimums, there's no extra fees. It works whether you have a small budget or you just don't want to drop a few grand all at once. Thank you so much, Ammo Squared, for providing this cool service and for supporting the show.
Kind of in the same PSYOP state, Vince, I'll start with you on this. The question is, from what you've researched for Borderland, do you think the CIA has actually been involved in the drug trade, or is that overblown? Is that a PSYOP?
Woo, man. Here's what we know from our interviews with CIA agents, former CIA agents, very credible people, and they have said it themselves. They don't care about the drugs. They care about the overall mission of national security of America. And if the drugs is part of that, they will let it be. If they're helping fund, if the drugs are helping funding something that is overall coincides with their goal in national security, and that even means helping a cartel gain power. That even means letting the money flow. If that is part of the bigger mission of theirs, they will let it happen, or they'll assist in letting it happen. And that is an interesting thing to know, right? Like, the CIA genuinely has an idea of what they believe is best for our nation. And they don't give a shit what anyone else thinks. The FBI, the DOD, doesn't matter. If they believe, here's the mission, guys, this is what keeps our country safe or in power. I would say it more like in power. If this makes the mission power, and this means 10,000 innocent people die, it's okay. We'll let it slide. That's the crazy thing about the CIA. And everyone who's listened to the show knows it. We've had two. The blonde lady who was an FBI and CIA agent, she spoke clearly about this, And then on top of that, we had John, who was also a very controversial individual who went to prison for a little small time. That individual, both those CIA agents, both confirmed the CIA will do whatever they have to complete their mission.
Yeah, this is why it's very obvious that, like, when people say that I'm an agent, it's very untrue because I don't like people dying. But you just read anything about Nicaragua, Pablo Escobar, like the Colombia cartel, you know that the CIA played a major role and they were using American counterparts. Let's talk about crack. Like, literally as far back as you want to go, pick a drug, pick a Latin American country, the CIA is there. And that's why also it's very, we have to be pretty critical, speaking of critical thinking, when we're talking about the fact that the CIA has now been authorized to conduct quote unquote covert operations in Venezuela when they are like the runt of the pack when it comes to drug trafficking. And there's a lot more than meets the eye here, people.
Yeah, it's interesting because why drugs? Well, drugs make money. Money helps facilitate anything, right? And so why does the CIA always seem to be connected to drugs? I believe that's the reason. The money that needs to be used to facilitate whatever the mission is, right? To keep people happy, to keep their mouths shut, to use that money to help overthrow. Whatever the case is, drugs is always going to be a big creator of the financial backing. So that's a fascinating, interesting thing. And Kat, you need to watch the Jordan interview because
Your PSYOP?
You need to watch it because listen, he says the government hired him. The government says they didn't hire him. And then I'm like, oh man, this is deep. But it was to overthrow Venezuela and it didn't work out. And he talks about the CIA involved. Like, it's wild. It's just the weirdest story ever.
Yeah, sure, I'll watch your PSYOP. But here's the thing. I think it's more than just about money, okay? It's about control. And drugs are chemical and psychological warfare. This dates back to the Chinese dynasties, right? And this is why we're seeing the Chinese having produced all of the precursors for fentanyl and teaching the cartels how to produce fentanyl. Why? Because that's what the British did with the Chinese. That's how they tried to control and destroy their society and their populations. And I think when you have something so lucrative as drugs that is also used as a method of controlling people and keeping them sick or weak or broke, whatever it is, I mean, talk about a PSYOP. Okay, that is just like coupled with every possible level of power you can imagine. Control, money, weakness. I don't know. It's just absolutely insane. Yeah, like if I wasn't a journalist, 100% I'd be a drug trafficker.
Yeah, we're going to clip that out and put it without context.
Yeah, yeah, that's gonna be a clip.
That's
We're gonna
going to
go
be
ahead and put
great,
somewhere.
Kat.
I think people know that already. And I think that's why I get a lot of those comments of like, she supports the cartels. It's like, no, I don't. But I can appreciate a good business model when I see one.
I would be
Objectively.
a baseball coach, but that's just me.
Pathetic. Sorry.
The question is, what do you know about the Mexican cartel training in Ukraine? Also, recent headline.
I'll just the little that I know, I've heard that there is people getting that is going to Ukraine, and I've heard more on the side of learning the drone warfare. That's what I was told. Some of the internal guys I have in Mexico were mentioning it. Also, that Ukraine was sending some guys down, and I think recently there was some intel on a Canadian special operations guy that was involved in this space. But yeah, I've heard a little bit about it. Don't know much.
So the initial report was that Mexican cartels were sending sort of lower level guys or guys who had drone knowledge to Ukraine through private military companies and their contracts to learn first person view drone tactics, which we know that drone tactics have been on the up in terms of cartel warfare in Mexico. We literally just saw, I want to say 2 days ago, drone strikes at the Attorney General's office in Tijuana. And that sends a message. Now, in my initial dispatch, when I talked about this, I think that was the extent or the gist of what I said. When I did some more digging and some more time went on, it almost seems like what was really happening were recruits for the cartels from other Latin American and Central American countries, particularly Colombia, were being sent to Ukraine through these private military companies, learning the first person view tactics and not going back to Colombia, but going to Mexico and immediately embedding with the cartels and working with them. Now, here's the thing. I have an issue. I've had an issue with this from the get-go, that you can just like volunteer, go to Ukraine and just like kill people and learn warfare tactics no matter who you are. I think that's a little weird, okay? Like there needs to be some more checks and balances. And the fact that there were so many private military companies that were able to operate with like very little personal information from the individuals who were like, I guess, deploying to Ukraine, also led for this like huge margin of error for cartels to go and learn how to use drones. This is something that we know has been on their to-do list. It's like up there with learning how to perfect making fentanyl precursors, okay? And both are just as dangerous, because now when you have Mexican National Guard or the army going in to conduct operations against high-level cartel members, we know, have had a high-level armory, but now with these first-person view drone tactics, it takes their level of warfare to a different world, honestly. And it's something that I don't even see Mexican special forces being able to combat, because also these guys who learned these tactics in Ukraine learned from the best. I mean, you guys can see those videos of how they're using drones in Ukraine all over social media and how they're like exact pinpoint targeting each individual person. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Did that happen? Yes. Is it continuing to happen? I'm unsure. And if it is, it's certainly not at the same level it was, because I know that Poland, Ukraine, Mexico, and one other European country cracked down on Latin American individuals arriving in Ukraine to fight the war, or through private military companies or through Moldova, whatever it is. It's pretty nuanced, this topic, but yeah, it was happening.
All right. So last question. It's a little bit of a trickier one, but I feel like we need to address it because this is a common theme that I see in almost every Borderland, especially Narcosis episode. So the official question is, why only villainize the cartels and not the head of the state or the US government? Which I want to kind of reframe that question into more like, how much responsibility do you guys think the United States bears in fueling cartel power through demand policy and gaps in law enforcement? Because I'll say this, I just maintaining what we want the show to be. We want to present all sides, and I don't want it to seem like we ignore the US's part in all of this. And so I wanted you both to be able to address this at this time, that, you know, we're not trying to ignore the US's participation in all of this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I don't think this question really fully applies to me because most of my comments are about how I support the cartel. People think that I'm like a spokesperson for them. But in my opinion, and I think if you're a critical thinker with half a brain, you would realize that my reporting is very balanced. Okay. I mean, we just talked about the fucking CIA's role in drugs here and how there can be a death toll and collateral, but it doesn't matter in the bigger picture of national security, right? I think like when we're reporting on these stories, sometimes it's just hard to, especially when you're really in the crux of it and trying to get all the information and a little bit of analysis within it, to get across that, at least personally for me, because I'm not a PsyOper, is to show you that I'm not on one side, I'm not on the other side, I'm not, oh yeah, hoorah administration, but I'm also not like, fuck yeah, like let's go cartels whatsoever. I'm just presenting the information in the most fair way I possibly can. And I also think that some people fail to realize that it is a pretty big undertaking and nothing I say will make everybody happy or everybody digest the information in the same way. So I think that I do a pretty solid job at showing you, yes, these transnational governments do play a role in allowing this to happen, albeit Mexico, the US, or Canada. But also cartels are bad. And at the end of the day, you have this criminal organization that's operating and killing many people. Many people are losing their livelihoods because of it. And sure, there are a lot of politicians that are turning a blind eye or even accepting a payment to allow this to go on. And I talk about that deterioration of integrity within government all the time. So I don't think that applies to me, but you go ahead, PsyOp King.
No, I don't think we try to villainize the cartels. I think we've proven that I think what we have done more by accident is vilify the CIA. I think we've shown their involvement in a lot, and we weren't afraid to show that. I think in this conversation, we've shown also, the push and pull of drugs, the supply and demand. We are the biggest demand for that drug. We are the biggest demand for human trafficking. So that is a concern, and we've addressed that. I think just in this very conversation, me being someone who is a former federal agent, someone who's spent a lot of time on the border, I've seen the terrible things that the drug trafficking organizations do as well, just so they can gain profit. And so in this conversation with Borderland, why we even have success, I think a lot of people are looking for more information on the subject. And when you talk about this subject, you have to talk about the cartel and their involvement in all the terrible things that happen in that drug trafficking organization world. But on top of that, we've definitely talked about the impacts of what it does in America and why even America is the place that consumes all of this shit. So it's an interesting topic. In the journalism, I guess, bylaws, we try and keep it neutral. But by chance, everyone who comes on here does talk about the negative aspects of the cartel. I can't say that there's a positive aspect that I'm looking for in them. I think that it is generally a negative thing. I grew up in LA. The gangs weren't a positive. They kept the streets safe on their own terms, right? So I guess you can try and find the positive in all of it. But in the end, it's not following the law. And so as someone who has a background in law, I guess I would always lean more towards kind of dismantling the cartel and law and order, right? And so there is a balance to that. Too much law and order becomes a prison. And I don't want that either for this country. And so I try and keep a balance somewhat, but I would say that because of someone who's, won the badge, done the job, we are very critical on how the cartel manages things and sees the corruption and how it can be with that much money. And so that's our focus, and just explaining and educating people on I would say, just how the cartel works. And if that feels to this person who asked this question, why you villainize the cartel? I was like, in the world of good and evil, the cartel from America's position is the villain. And so we do our best to educate people on how it works.
I think in everyone's perspective, that's the villain at the end of the day.
I would think so, but it's the weirdest thing to get a question like this.
Well, no,
but again,
I think that you can, as a journalist, be neutral, whatever. And when I have taken journalism courses, it's the same thing. You get the truth out there, you give balanced reporting, but at the end of the day, you're a human being. You know right from wrong. You have a code of ethics. As long as your personal ethics aren't placing judgment onto like a disproportionate group. Yeah, like I will tell you in the story, it's bad that they are killing pregnant women for their babies, okay? That is evil. What do you want me to be neutral about that? Please.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching this episode of Questions and Answers from me here at Borderland Narcosis, and Kat at Dispatches, and our producer, our producer who does so much for both of our shows, Bruna. Thank you so much, everyone. If you guys have any more questions, every time you put them in the comments, we'll collect them, and probably every month or so, we'll do another one of these.
Thank you for listening to Borderland Narcosis, an Ironclad original presented by First Form. Go get your First Form supplements at firstform.com/borderland. Take care.